Chapter 18 Breaking the Siege. While Miranda wrestled with the other Parutama warrior, and the increasingly overwhelmed guards tried to fight off their summoned enemies, Zelda was forced to back away from the remaining Parutamu. Throwing her boomerang while moving toward the palace doors, her pursuer was able to dodge it again, as well as when the weapon came back from behind, but the distraction gave the queen enough time to get back inside before he could catch her.
"What are you all still doing here?"
she asked upon seeing the interior guards still at their posts.
"The palace is being invaded! Go help the exterior guards!"
Without hesitation, the guards around her drew their swords, rushing towards the still open doors, only to be met by the Parutamu. The helmeted warrior swung his sword, putting a long gash across the first guard's stomach before he could react, and after kicking the wounded man out of the way, he attacked the next one as well. Whoever these Parutamu warriors were, they were certainly skilled with a blade, since, one at a time, the guards were defeated by him. Throwing her boomerang just as the last guard in the way was cleaved nearly in half, her pursuer grunted in surprise as the flying weapon struck him right in the forehead. The helmet protected him, and it only took him a moment to recover, but this was long enough for the boomerang to return to the queen's hand so that she could throw it again. This time, however, she didn't throw it at the Parutamu, but upward toward the ropes that held the chandeliers in place. Her pursuer had just shaken off the surprised blow when he cried out in shock after the flying weapon had broken the rope, causing the heavy wooden fixture to come crashing down on his head. Without hesitation, the queen tossed her boomerang again and again and again, striking her pursuer's helmet with a repeated clank, 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 all of which he was unable to do anything about.
"Call off those monsters you summoned!"
Zelda ordered, stepping closer and holding the weapon ready.
"Drop your weapon now and order your partner to do the same, and I give you my word that the punishment for this attack will only be banishment from Hyrule."
The Parutamu was silent for a moment as if considering her proposal, but then he started laughing. His laughter got louder and more hysterical, to the point where the queen started to think that he had lost his mind, but then the laughter stopped, replaced with an angry roar as her pursuer got to his feet, tossing the chandelier away as if it were far lighter than it was. With a loud crash, the fixture was broken, so Zelda threw her boomerang again, only to gasp when he caught it in her hand.
"Zelda, you are in no position to make demands," the Parutamu replied with an irritated tone. "You are already a slave to the great boss Guma, and now I shall put you in your place." Expecting him to simply discard the weapon, the queen was shocked when he tossed it back at her, causing Zelda's vision to go white for a moment as it struck her right between the eyes with a hard whack. She must have been knocked off her feet because when her vision came back into focus, she was lying on the floor and her pursuer was standing over her, with his sword thrusting downward. Instinctively managing to move just enough so that the blade stabbed into the floor instead of her chest, the queen brought her foot up as hard as she could into the pursuer's groin, causing him to groan while stumbling backwards. No, the attack wasn't very effective, but it did give Zelda the chance to get halfway to her feet before scrambling up the stairs. He continued after her once again, making her cry out when he grabbed her by the hair just as she reached the top of the curved staircase, and now very painfully pulling her backwards while swinging the blade. This move was clearly meant to kill her, the blade coming right toward the queen's throat, while she was bent backwards into a helpless position, but then her foot slipped out from under her. Falling backwards enough to avoid having her throat cut, there was a ripping sound as the sword sliced through the majority of her long brown hair instead, both freeing her from Parutamu's grip and making him lose his balance. Flailing his arms to find something to catch himself on, and even dropping his sword in order to catch hold of the handrail, Zelda's pursuer missed his chance. Forming a kind of backwards roll, there was a lot of crashing and banging as he tumbled all the way down the curved staircase, making an even louder crash when he finally reached the floor at the bottom. Fortunately for him, the armor and helmet saved him from a lot of the damage, but not from the queen. While her pursuer was falling, Zelda had picked up his fallen sword and ran back down the stairs after him, raising the weapon and swinging it just as he was getting up. The finely sharpened blade tore into the face mask part of the Parutamu's helmet, causing him to cry out in pain while a small spray of blood shot out. And then he let out a yelp as the queen swung the blade a second time, leaving a gash across the front of his legs.
The pursuer stumbled sideways, falling to his knees against a nearby pillar that he immediately started using to get back up, but Zelda stopped him by swinging the sword yet again, this time making the Paratamu scream when his left hand was completely severed. Now collapsing to the floor and ending up on his back, the warrior started to say something, but never got the chance. By this point, the queen had seen enough of this warrior to last her a lifetime, so she turned the sword downward, raised it up as high as she could, and stabbed the blade down into his chest so hard that there was a clink when it struck the floor beneath him after going all the way through his body. Not satisfied with this, she put her foot on his stomach for leverage in removing the blade, only to stab him again, and again, and again. The uncontrollable anger that she was feeling was now starting to mix with the painful memories that she still had from being Ganondorf's prisoner for all that time, and instead of seeing the Paratamu warrior, all Zelda could see was her former captor. Again and again she struck him with the blade, stabbing and slashing while letting out a scream of both rage and fear, causing sprays of blood to splatter across both the nearby walls and herself. But the queen kept going until her arms became too tired to hold the weapon any longer. When her mind finally cleared and she saw the dismembered, almost unrecognizable remains of her pursuer, Zelda couldn't help vomiting where she stood, before stumbling back into the wall and slowly sinking to the floor. She felt awful and exhausted, but the strangest part was that she could no longer hear the battle going on outside. Had the guards somehow prevailed, she wondered? Or had they lost? And what about Miranda? Her answer came when a shadow approached the open door from outside, and at first, Zelda was afraid when she saw the other Paratamu walk into the palace, but he wasn't alone. Miranda was directly behind him. Her clothes torn, hair all down her face, nose bleeding, and a bruise forming around her eye. However, the chain from her hookshot was wrapped around the warrior's neck and wrists.
"You had better hope that your friend hasn't hurt my cousin," Miranda warned, choking her prisoner by pulling back on the chain. "Because if he has even... What in the hell happened here?"
The two of them both stopped, taking a moment to look down at what remained of the first Paratamu, and then at Zelda, who was still sitting against the wall with the blood-covered sword nearby. The good news was that with both of the warriors being either captured or killed, the minions they had summoned simply vanished, meaning that the siege of the North Palace was over. The queen was not exactly in the right frame of mind to give commands at the moment, so Miranda instructed the remaining guards to take the remaining Paratamu down to the dungeon. He was to be stripped of all armor and possessions before being chained up as uncomfortably as possible, and given 10 lashes by every single guard who had survived the attack. The guards seemed pleased with this, and it guaranteed that the prisoner wouldn't cause any trouble until she was ready to question him.
"Zelda, are you all right?"
Miranda asked, kneeling down with her once they were alone.
What happened to your hair?"
Now bringing up her hand to touch it for the first time since almost getting her head sliced off, the queen realized just how much of the previously long hair had been lost. It now didn't even reach her shoulders, and now the room didn't feel as warm as it had before, but Zelda reassured her cousin that she was all right, even though the memories of Ganondorf had not quite faded away.
"Well, no point in sitting here any longer,"
Miranda continued, helping the queen to her feet.
"I think a nice hot bath is in order before I make our newest prisoner scream out every secret he's ever known. You know, with your hair like that, you almost look like a different person."
A bath did sound nice right about now, and Zelda had no interest in whatever her cousin was planning on doing with the remaining Paratamu down in the dungeon, so long as she was able to find out what happened to Facade and Aghanim. Whoever this boss Guma that the Paratamu had mentioned was, he was going to pay dearly if anything had happened to either of their husbands.
"I knew Facade shouldn't have gone to King's Cross,"
she said as they slowly walked up the stairs.
"What are we going to do, Miranda?" "I'm not sure just yet,"
her cousin replied, wiping the blood from her nose.
"But with Link still on his quest, it might be up to us to save them."